Okay, so good evening, everyone. I am Ayushi, and you have joined Climate Fact Checks for a webinar on the theme India versus climate change. And today we have Dr. Bhupendranath Goswami with us. So, Dr. Goswami, I'll tell you about him. Like, he's a veteran climatologist and a meteorologist, and he's also the former director of Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology. And he has been awarded like one of the highest Indian awards in science, that is the prestigious uh, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award. And he's also known for his valuable research on Indian monsoon dynamics and like much more. And we are indeed very fortunate to have him with us today on this platform. And like I'm sure those of you who are joining us, like who are with us from India and across various countries, you are looking forward to an insightful discussion. So we'll start this webinar with him. So good evening, sir.
Good evening, I see. So how do you want to go about it?
Yes, sir. So like in this webinar, we have like we want to have your insights on various areas covered under our today's theme, that is India versus climate change. So since you're a veteran scientist, and when it comes to monsoon dynamics, you have a lot of knowledge, and your research has already evident is an good evidence for this. So it is observed that come to my first question. It's observed that growth and decay of civilizations has been intimately related to various monsoon dynamics in the region, especially in India. So, in what ways climate change is affecting Indian monsoon and their impact on the socio-economic conditions of our country?
Okay, indeed, the civilizations have depended on the monsoon in this region over different millennia. For example, during Vedic phases, Vedic times and Harappan civilizations, the western part of India was quite wet, and there was a lot of civilization flourishing there because there was rain. And so what seems to have, and then after some time that it started becoming dry, and therefore the people moved out of from there, and therefore that part became semi-arid, but the other part of the India became more flourishing. So this kind of changes have been going on in the over the period of time over the monsoon region, but in particular, especially during the recent century and a couple of centuries, the global warming is the major climate change or variable. This climate change is affecting monsoon in three different ways. One is of course it is increasing the number of extreme rainfall events and the frequency and this intensity of the extreme rainfall events. So, for example, the extreme rainfall in the central India are like 15 centimeter per day events are really big, and those events can be considered as extreme rainfall events. Those events have actually doubled over the last 50 years. And we feel that over the next and over the next 50 or 100 years, it will again triple and quadruple. So these events have a lot of hydrological impact, like the flash floods and landslides, and these affect the society, socio-economic conditions very seriously. So that is an important aspect of how monsoon is being affected by climate change. And in fact, the other way the monsoon is also affected by climate change is the total amount of rainfall during the monsoon season. That is total quantum of rainfall. Between June and September, we have about 900 centimeters of rainfall in the country, and that is changing, increasing at the rate of about 3% per degree increase of global mean temperature. So it is slowly increasing. So total amount of rainfall is increasing with global warming. So these are two important things that one has, of course, once the rainfall increases, and on the top of that, the the extreme events increase, the hydrological potential also increases. So therefore, we have to be prepared for that. And that is one aspect. The third aspect is where the monsoon is affected by climate change is the distribution of the rainfall in the country. And this is a recent research that we have done. And so what we find is that the monsoon has a very special character. The northeast part is wet. There is a lot of rain, the highest rainfall in the world. But in the western part of India in general is much drier. And so this is a very characteristic feature of monsoon rainfall distribution. Now, this distribution of rainfall is getting changed. And how it is getting changed is that the rainfall in the eastern part is getting decreased at the rate of about 8% over the last 100 years or so. And it's increasing in the western part by about 20%, 20 to 25%. It has increased over the last 100 years. So there is a shift. So as a result, what happens is the eastern part rainfall is decreasing and western part is increasing. So the larger rainfall region has shifted towards west. So we call it a westward shift of the monsoon rainfall zone. And so this has happened, and we see that this is going to happen even in the coming years because of the global warming. And it is going to increase the westward expansion of the rainfall, and therefore most of the semi-arid region may become more humid and monsoon-like, and therefore it will have a very important socio-economic implications in the regions, because they will be able to more vegetation can grow, more food production can take place, and various other socio-economic implications will be there. So that way, there are three different ways the monsoon can be affected by and they have some positive things, but fortunately for India, the westward expansion will have a positive impact on the western side of the Indian continent. In most of the time we talk about all negative impacts of climate change, but here is one case where we think that there will be a certain amount of positive impact and potential for improvement of our food productivity in this region in the coming years. So there are three different ways that the Indian monsoon is going to be affected by the climate change.
Yes, sir. So also you were saying like increase in the monsoon spell in the western part, and in your recent study on Thar Desert, you have mentioned that climate change would lead to around 50 to 100% increase in the mean summer rainfall over the semi-arid northwest of India. So if this happens, like how will this change the ecosystem? How will this change in the ecosystem affect the rainfall patterns in the future? Because it will be a vast change. There.
Right. It is expected to be a significantly large change. So this change is of course going to affect the ecosystem. Right now, it is a kind of semi-arid, desertous ecosystem, right? So there are certain type of trees grow, only certain type of like the thorny trees or the cactus type of things grow, and there are other species. They are also very special type that has the manages with whatever rainfall that is there, right? So if there is more rainfall, this is going to change. And of course, from desertous ecosystem, it is going to transform into a monsoon-like ecosystem. So to do that, it is essentially what normally will happen. It is not going to happen overnight, because it will take time to this happen. About 100 years or more than 100 years, things will slowly change. During this process, the ecosystem is going to change. And for that, normally what happens is that many of the species where there will be more rain, those species will not like that rain, and therefore they will move away. They will move to the drier regions to the west. So this region, there is a western side, there will be still desert, right? So there will be a movement of species towards west, and other species from the central India monsoon and climate will move towards this region. So therefore, there will be, this is the kind of adaptation process normally happens. If the the change is not very fast, then the different species have the time to relocate, and they do relocate, and that is how the changes takes place of one ecosystem to another ecosystem. So we hope that over a period of about 100 years or so, the ecosystem will change and adapt itself to change, and that change will be towards a monsoonal or more humid ecosystem. And that will definitely be beneficial for various other things. But this adjustment, we cannot do that. If suddenly change something, of course, there will be a lot of impact on the local ecosystem. But the changes take place relatively slowly, and naturally, system adjusts to itself, and that is by migrating to appropriate climatic zones.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Also, I would like if there is any question from the audience, you can post it on chat, and I'll read out that question to sir. So moving on to this, you said increase in the intensity of rainfall is also observed. So is it a direct consequence of climate change? Is climate change causing this intense rainfall? Like, what is your observation on this within these years?
Yes, it is. It is indeed a direct consequence of the climate change. It is because as the earth warms due to the climate change, the global warming takes place. The atmosphere essentially now can hold more moisture, because the temperature rises, the moisture holding capacity of the atmosphere increases. So therefore, it will contain more moisture. So yes, when the atmospheric column contains more moisture, it becomes a little bit more unstable. And the extreme events are basically the local instability. So what happens is that then now a small upward motion can produce a large, so trigger such an instability. This instability then can converge more moisture from the surrounding region, because now there are more moisture in the convergence brings in more moisture, and it makes a bigger event, the strong event. So because of the increase in the moisture content in the atmosphere, it produces a stronger event. Now, when it becomes a stronger event, so the extreme event starts increasing. Now, when the strong event takes place, it brings out a lot of moisture from the neighborhood, and it sort of dries out temporarily in the neighborhood. So therefore, what happens is that in the next few days or so, then it will have to adjust itself to come back to equilibrium, normal moisture condition. By the time, the small and medium events will not take place. So as a result, it will decrease the number of small and medium rainfall events and increase the big events. And that is why the frequency of occurrence and intensity of the extreme events will increase as a result of climate change. And you can expect the frequency and intensity of the medium and the low events to decrease. That is exactly what we have seen. And that is why it's physically consistent to it, the sort of climate change. And we studied this quite some time ago, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. We published a paper where we showed that these events in India are increasing at a pretty rapid rate.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, but if you think about the mean climate, the extreme events are very local instability. Therefore, everywhere the humidity increases. Therefore, the extreme events will increase everywhere. It doesn't matter whether everywhere there is precipitation, it will increase. Now, the mean rainfall, however, need not increase. It depends on the large scale dynamics. So therefore, it is also, we found that the mean rainfall over central India and Western India, it is increasing at rate, as I mentioned, about 3% or 4% per degree increase. But in the northeast India, the mean rainfall is actually decreasing. Although but the extreme events are also increasing. Their extreme events are increasing even in North India. So extreme events are increasing everywhere, but the mean rainfall can increase or decrease depending on the large scale conditions. And the large scale conditions can be again modulated by the climate change. So as a result of which we find that within our monsoon system, the northeast region, the mean rainfall can decrease, whereas in the central India, the mean rainfall can increase. Whereas the extreme events are increasing in all over the place.
Yes, sir. So this proportionate things which are happening, like we have a question from the audience, like how does climate change disproportionately affect vulnerable communities in India, and what can be done to address these inequalities, like
Okay.
different section of people who are getting affected?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. And climate change, you think about the cause of the climate change. The basic climate change, cause of the climate change is the production of the greenhouse gases. And this has happened through our industrial revolution. And the model of our growth model, the economic growth model is the GDP growth model, right? GDP growth model of development. It prefers sort of bigger industries. So it is highly energy intensive industries. So as a result of this energy demand, we have created and used up a lot of fossil fuels, and this fossil fuel is essentially producing the climate change. Now, this process itself has, first of all, increased the inequality in the socio-economic condition. The rich has become richer, the poor has become poorer. Now, that itself has caused a certain amount of inequality. Now, and the result of this is causing the climate change. Climate change is also causing disproportionately affecting the vulnerable, poorer section of the society because of the various things. Let me give you some example. For example, the marginal vulnerable society people are dependent on a lot of natural resources, right? Like our Adivasi people, right? They depend on natural resources, and because of this development, we have cut down a lot of natural resources, and the resources are not available to them. So they are, because of this developmental model, we have already depriving them for the source of the livelihood. On the top of that, the extreme events like the heat waves and which are increasing due to climate change, and the floods, erosion, everything, that also affects the poorer section of the society much more, because the richer society is happily placed somewhere else, but because these people have to face the brunt of these, and their property, their whatever livelihood is damaged by these, so they are disproportionately affected by that. Also, due to the flooding, due to climate change, you have a lot of relocations. The people are displaced, right? Many people have to live in shelters for a long time, and it is only the poorer section of the society gets affected by this, whereas the richer persons are not really affected by any of these. So therefore, the inequality is caused by the climate. The human activity related to the climate change, and the climate change impact, in addition, further affects the poorer section of the society much more directly, and therefore the marginalized community definitely is affected and disproportionately by the climate change. And I think the what can be done, what we can do is only way to change the probably our developmental model. So we have to. There is, of course, all we talk about this inequity in the United Nations the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to reduce, and everybody says that we must reduce, but nobody does anything about it. That is the big problem. The problem is that we are not walking the talk. How do we do that? If we continue to follow the GDP growth model for development, which demands so much of energy, and it is never going to happen unless. So we need to go to a different model of development where there will be equitable distribution of wealth. It is now what happens under this model of development, only few big entities control everything, and therefore they earn a lot more money, and therefore, and also through the automation and everything, now the job creation by these big industries have gone down. So therefore, it does not create as many jobs, but at the same time, their profit is higher. So therefore, this model must change. We need to go to something like a focus on more on MSME type of model, where we focus everything will be done by smaller entities, where in a collective manner, and then maybe the profit of those individual entities need not be very high, but then there will be more jobs created and there will be equitable distribution. But this is a serious, and it needs to be debate. There has to be debate, and we need to change this model to a much more equitable model of development.
Yes, sir. So also, like because of development reasons, is we are seeing increase in energy demand in India, and it is
Right.
causing ecological damage and stress to the environment as well. So it is also affecting poor section, like energy demand, which is very much we are listening these days. That for the poor, they are saying that it is for the poor only. We need to like extract
Correct.
these fossil fuels out and everything for the development of poor, but poor are only affected, like most affected by it, no?
Right, right. So I think, yeah, this is a sort of, I think, we must, I think, currently let us look at what is happening. Basically, the energy demand globally is increasing at a rate which is much higher than the rate at which we are able to generate the renewable energy. First of all, we are not taking climate action, which is to cut down the emission. And without cutting down emission, we cannot stop this climate change problem and reverse it. But our plan is still to continue to use fossil fuel. I think this whole model of continuing to use fossil fuel just is absolutely not sustainable. It cannot be sustained. And unless we stop this energy demand, cut down the energy demand, or you increase your much more the green energy generation must increase exponentially, but it's not happening. We are not putting enough investment to green energy innovation. Globally, if you see, from 2012, the globally green innovation numbers have gone down. So globally, so people are still not promoting fossil fuels and subsidizing them. For example, United States is now subsidizing something like undercutting the price so that it, in a way that is subsidizing, right? So like up the tune of about $600 billion a year to promote the use of fossil fuel, because that is cheap and the companies can make more money. But that is killing us. Instead, if we had spent that $600 billion in innovations, green energy innovation, probably we could have solved the problem. So I think we have to look at it that way, that today we have to completely stop on use of fossil fuels. Emissions, we cannot. Even India is doing pretty well in terms of generating green energy, but our demand will still pretty high, and our target of net zero is only 2070. In my opinion, this is still not sustainable. It is too long for us to continue to use the fossil fuel. We cannot. So therefore, we need to do something about it, and only way it can be done is to change this development model, cut down energy demand, and nationally we have to, internationally also we have to cut down. And if problem is that the developing countries, even if the developing countries do something, unless the developed countries take the do their bit, they are not take their action on the emission. It is the problem we cannot solve. So we have to somehow force the developed countries to take action. If we cannot, then we also cannot continue to use these fossil fuels and target net zero only in 2070. So this is very complex problem, but I think unless we do something very drastic, I think the future is very very grim for our grandchildren.
Yes, sir. So also, in your opinion, like what are the other areas in which India is lacking when it comes to taking climate change responsibility for a big nation like India?
Yeah, as I said, India is India is doing reasonably well in terms of green energy generation, but yes, we are still thinking about sort of very high growth, economic growth, like 8% growth over the next several decades. That high economic growth following this model will still demand a very high energy demand, right? So that is, in my view, it is not very sustainable. Of course, the government has a lot of arguments that we will achieve this energy growth, but I think but we cannot really afford to use more and more energy. So as a responsible country, I think we need to relook at this and cut down energy consumption, energy demand, and possibly sort of revise our net zero target, so that we will contribute. Whether this West will contribute or not, we have to contribute ourselves towards this this goal.
So, and there's a question from the audience, like this year's union budget has shown that India is primed for green growth. And has this accelerated the funding of various institutions which are tackling with climate change? Like institutional-wise, is it happening now or is it delayed? The progress is slow.
Actually, I'm not very competent to answer that question because I'm neither an economist or a social scientist. But I think many of this green growth idea is very good, but are we going to be able to achieve it or not? It depends on how the rate of our energy production, green energy production. As I said, the green innovations, we have not put enough money, enough investment. We need more than $1 trillion of investment to come up quickly into new ideas of how we can generate more new green energy, and also carbon capture. We have to invest a lot in the carbon capture, because carbon capture is going to be a major sort of possibility. So if there is already about 36 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere, okay, and now if we can somehow pull this out of the atmosphere, then the problem will be somewhat sort of we can make a dent on the problem. So, and this carbon capture, some developments are taking place now on research mode that we can do, take out some of them and sequester them in some way, someplace where they will not be emitted again back into the atmosphere for a long time. So, and there is some progress in this, but there is investments required to make them in a large scale, so that we can bring down the carbon dioxide concentration from the atmosphere. We have to do both. We have to do this, take away carbon from the atmosphere, sequester it, and reduce emission. And so unless we do both, we will not be able to control this problem. I think there is I think bottom line is that that we need a lot of new innovations for which there may be funding may be required, and this funding, if we depend on the mainly on the private sector, it may not come, because private sector is only their basic I think bottom line is what they know best. So so they will not invest all that much in this. So I think government must come forward and invest on new green innovations much more than we have been doing.
Okay. So private players like can they play a role in mitigating climate change like after the government's efforts, or you said like from themselves they cannot play a major role right now? First, government
Well,
has to initiate. Then private players. Is there a scope for
it's not
private?
like it's not like that. But if you see that in India, I don't see a history of private players are putting enough money on innovations for the public good. Okay, they do some innovations for their own commercial good. Okay, so the
Yes.
public good is like a broader problem level climate change. I have not seen anybody really investing anything. People are talking. The private people are talking now. Everything we are making green, but this is all smart accounting and sweet talks. But I don't think anything has happened. But I have great concern about that, because there is no history of Indian private sector has not invested enough on any such private good. So I don't see that is coming forward also in the coming years. But so therefore, I think government initiatives are important. But government, if they can make the private sector do something like that, that is something that we have to see. If that is also be, because government has certain private sector company, government has given a lot of advantage, and maybe they can make them to do some invest more on these. So I think this is something that we have to wait and see.
Yes, sir.
Mm.
That is true, sir. Also, we have a question from the audience that you explained the westward shift of monsoon. I
Mm.
want to know what impacts can be expected on cities like Mumbai, which gets flooded often and has poor urban infrastructure. What are your thoughts?
Yes, sir. I think this is a good question. Mumbai is little different. Mumbai already gets a lot of rain. This western shift is not going to influence Mumbai very much. It is mostly north of Mumbai, in that west northwest sector is where we are expecting more rainfall to happen. Mumbai will remain more or less similar. But in that sector, like Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, in that
Northwest. Yes, sir.
northwest part, that part it will significantly change, and that definitely is going to have an impact on the urban infrastructure, because these are our extreme event. When the mean rainfall increases, the extreme events are also going to increase, because right now their intensity and the frequency of the extreme events are going to increase. Now we see that all the last few years we have already seen in Gujarat, Haryana, and Rajasthan, in these regions, several floods have taken place, and it has created a big havoc, and this frequency is going to increase. And so therefore we have to be prepared for these. So there will we expect more flooding, and associated with that, there is potential for landslide. So these two things are we have seen over Uttarakhand and other places this year, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. So so these things are going to increase. So we have to prepare for that. So things that can be done is to avoid that, like building houses in the discharge area. Like, see, most of the time the flash floods affects and where they're near a river or a water drainage area, because of tourist attractions or something, we start building houses. So we have to make sure that we have to change our building codes so that we do not allow such construction to happen. These are going to be affected more and more in the coming years. So, and we need to create better disaster management in those areas. Probably the disaster management related to floods were not well developed. Now we have to develop so that we can minimize the damage and loss during such floods. So, for example, last year's, this year's July flood in Delhi itself apparently cost something like 15,000 crores, one episode of flood. This kind of floods are going to be economically also damaging to the country because the numbers are going to increase. So there will be more losses going to take place. So how do you minimize that? For that, you have to prepare proper disaster management. So predict them fast, so we can put better prediction system so that we can give warning and then evacuate people and prepare for less damage. So that kind of thing has to be done. The buildings and infrastructure should be, see, the Delhi flood also was exaggerated by the bad development of a lot of bridges over Yamuna. So these kind of things we have to avoid. We are not allowing the water to pass freely. So water channels must be cleared and development should not obstruct those. So these are the things that we have to prepare for adaptation to these extreme events that are going to increase in intensity and frequency.
Yes, sir. So if there are any more questions from the audience, you can let us know in the chat. Also, sir, you said about this like disaster management plans and everything, especially while taking the case of landslides recently, we have seen in Shimla that due to like in the infrastructure, heavy load in that lens, in certain areas, the landslides were seen. So the local people needs to be aware more on this. No? So how can education and awareness campaigns it can help in climate action in India?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is a very important part. I think yes. we need to educate people the danger of these. See, one thing is that people will start building houses wherever they find it easy and cheap. But we have to educate them that this is not possible, that this is not good for you, and this is what we expect to happen in the end. And so I think these what I'm saying about the there has to be two types of thing. One is the government has to develop adaptation policy, how we can adapt to this increasing intensity. So those will depend on some of the building codes modifications, so disaster management, preparedness, and all that. But also there has to be communication to the people. So there should be so what we are, like this research that we have done, I think it is important to communicate what we see and what is expected to happen, and how, so that people can also be prepared. So that is one of the reasons that I agreed to talk to you, because I think through this media we should try to communicate to the people that these are the increasing potential hazards that we are going to face. And to face this hazard, we should be prepared. And to prepare ourselves, we have to adjust ourselves how we can minimize the damage. So therefore, some sacrifice we have to do in terms of in the building more stronger houses, or in places which are safer. So these are issues that we need to communicate and educate people about that.
Yes, because this type of infrastructure is like overburdening the ecosystem in that area. The carrying capacity is increasing, so that's why more landslides are seen, and people are not aware of it.
Exactly. Now, in the Northeast also, it is a very serious problem, and I have seen that. And so on Northeast, there is even large more rain, right? So, and this rain needs to be needs places to drain out, and that is why we have lot of rivers, a lot of small rivers which bring the rain to the big river Brahmaputra. Now, what has happened is that these rains fall on this. There are a lot of mountains in this region. Now, in this in these mountains also, the rain will fall on the mountain, then it has to it falls down. So it creates a gorges. So these ravines are the actually drainage area. Now people have started building houses over there. And because that is easy to build, but right now it is okay. But one day they will, and then that is where exactly this kind of will happen. This also seismically in this region is seismically very sensitive. So, so with these kind of houses built in those unstable regions, another big earthquake will also make them fall and people will die. So these are things that we need to actually educate people that we should not do this, and also make certain regulations about where you can build and where you cannot build. So I think this is similar things have to be done in the western part now.
Yes, sir. That's good.
Mm.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I think audience have sent their questions as well. Some interesting questions they've sent. And so if there are no more questions, like we would like to thank you, sir, for your valuable time. Like,
thank you very much.
I think all of us has a lot to learn from this session. Special thank to our audience.
Okay.
And
thank you. Thank you, Aishi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So we'll look forward for more such webinars in the future, and we'll post the updates on our social media platform.
Sure. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.